Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the Churchill III, the Tier 5 Russian Premium Heavy Tank. This tank is available from the tech tree for 1500 gold, or it's available from the gift shop. Now, this is one of these tanks that goes on sale at 50% off 2 or 3 times a year, so you're probably going to be able to pick up a Churchill 3 at least 2 or 3 times a year for 750 gold. And the question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth 1500 gold if you want to buy it full price, or 750 gold if you pick it up in a half price special? Now, as per usual, we're going to start with the history of the tank, and I'm going to try and focus on the Churchill 3 as much as I can, because like a lot of other reviews, if I focused on just the Churchill line of tanks and talked about Churchill history, we'd be here for hours. The Churchill 3 is the tank that was shipped as part of the Lend-Lease program to the USSR, so I'm just going to be focusing on this particular tank. Basically, the Churchill was originally designed in 1940. Now, 1940 was a time when the British public were expecting an invasion across the English Channel. The German Blitzkrieg machine had basically captured and taken over most of Europe, and the British public were waiting for a German invasion. So plans for the Churchill were very, very quickly drawn up in 1940, and the tank went into mass production in 1941 very, very quickly. As a result, because of going into production so quickly, there were a lot of issues with the tank. Basically, the engines malfunctioned an awful lot, and also the early variants of the Churchill came with the 2-pounder gun, which is basically a 40mm gun, and those guns were shown to be ineffective against a lot of the new German armour. So basically the Churchill 1 and Churchill 2 came with the 2-pounder gun, and the Churchill 3 was developed around mid-1941. And basically the major differences between this and the early variants of the Churchill were the fact that this came with a 6-pounder gun. So this performed a lot better against German armour. However, because it was a different gun and different gun mount, it required changes to the turret. Now, a lot of early Churchills and even later Churchills come with rivets, and they came with riveted turrets. You'll notice there are no rivets on this particular turret because this was a completely redesigned turret simply to fix the or to mount the 6-pounder gun, and it was welded as opposed to riveted. The other major change between this and the early Churchill variants were, and even later Churchill variants, were that the 6-pounder or the 2-pounders weren't really good for firing HE, so a howitzer was mounted in the hull. And in-game on some of the Churchill tanks, you'll see a howitzer protruding from the hull, not so on the Churchill 3. The Churchill 3 actually received a machine gun as opposed to a howitzer. So around 700 of these Churchill 3s were manufactured around mid to late 1941. And it could have been the end of the Churchill story there, because, as I say, this tank was rushed into mass production due to fears of a German invasion. It wasn't performing very well, and there was talk about scrapping the entire Churchill line of tanks and focusing production on the Cromwell instead. However, in 1942, the battle for North Africa was in full swing, and as a result, 3 regiments of Churchill 3s were shipped to North Africa as a test. It was simply just a test to see how they performed in the desert, and they performed exceptionally well. In one action, in the second battle for El Alamein, 6 Churchill 3s were involved. They came under intense anti-tank fire from German anti-tank weapons, and all 6 tanks rolled out. In fact, 5 of them were completely unscathed. 1 of them was only slightly damaged, but all 6 tanks were combat efficient even after that action. And in that action, one of the Churchills received over 80 hits from German anti-tank weapons and was still combat effective. That was a very, very successful test. As far as the mythology of the Churchill III goes, it was also involved in another action that some of you might be familiar with in North Africa, where it basically took on a Tiger I. A Churchill III is reportedly the tank that took out a Tiger I. It fired a shot, the shot wedged between the turret and the turret ring on the Tiger I. The German tank, our crew, abandoned the Tiger I, and it became the first Tiger captured by the Allies in World War II. And that very same tank is the Tiger I that's currently in the Bovington Tank Museum. But apparently it was a Churchill that took it out, and a Churchill that was in North Africa simply on a test. So the 6-pounder gun was quite successful, and because of the actions of the Churchills in North Africa, they decided not to scrap the Churchill line of tanks. The Churchills were basically redeveloped, and they continued developing Churchills, Churchill IV, Churchill V, 6, 7. Churchills were basically produced in many shapes and forms and remained in service right up till about 1960, both in the UK and in a lot of other countries. But because we're focusing on the Churchill III, we're just going to be focusing on the fact it was a Lend-Lease tank. 700 were manufactured, around 700 were manufactured in total. 300 of those were shipped to the USSR, with some lost during shipping. But it performed quite well, and it's the Lend-Lease tank for the USSR that we have in game. There are 3 other premium heavy tanks in the game, and we're going to be comparing it against the Excelsior, the British Tier 5 heavy, the T-14, the American Tier 5 heavy, and the KV-220, the other Russian Tier 5 heavy. And kicking off, you'll see straight away that we have 700 hit points on the Churchill III. That has more hit points than any of the other tanks. Not by much, but it still has more hit points. It gives the tank a little bit more survivability than maybe the other tanks have, and it can maybe survive an extra hit. It's quite a heavy tank. In fact, the Churchill III is known as a heavy tank, but yet when we compare it against the other Tier 5 premium vehicles, you'll see that it comes in at 42 tons, which actually makes it the lightest of all the Tier 5 premium heavies. The Excelsior comes in at 44 tons, the T-14 comes in at 50 tons, and the KV-220 is an absolute monster at 70 tons. Next, we have a negative for the Churchill III, and that is its engine power. Because it's quite a heavy tank and the engine is a little bit lacking, it doesn't have a very good horsepower to weight ratio, especially in comparison to the other Tier 5 heavies. 600 horsepower, 720 horsepower, and 650 horsepower means that the other tanks can accelerate faster, they can climb hills faster, and that is definitely one of the Churchill III's failings. It's quite slow. It's a heavy tank with not a very good engine and a slow top speed as a result of 28 kilometers an hour, which makes it the slowest of all the Tier 5 premium heavies. And as a result, it suffers from all the other negatives that happen when you're driving a slow tank. Sometimes your team is too good and you can't keep up with the action. You do well on one flank, but the other flank collapses and you're just not quick enough to relocate. You're not quick enough to get into positions early in game. You're not quick enough to get out of positions if it looks as if you're about to be overrun. Basically, all the problems of a slow tank are problems that the Churchill III also has. Another negative for the tank is its traverse speed. Its hull traverse speed is very, very slow at 20 degrees per second. However, it's the same hull traverse speed as the T-14 and the KV-220 get, only the Excelsior is faster. So again, it's a negative, it's on the low side, but it's not terrible. You can play it. It's slow hull traverse speed, but it does make up for it with a reasonably fast turret traverse speed of 34 degrees per second. So that is significantly faster than the T-14 and the KV-220, and only slightly worse than the Excelsior. The view range is another positive for the tank. It's got 350 meters of view range, which is again equivalent to its British cousin the Excelsior, but is significantly better than the T-14 and the KV-220, and its signal range is fairly average at about 570, again comparable to the T-14 and the Excelsior, and only beats the KV-220. So all in all, it's a slow tank. It will struggle on some maps, it will struggle on hills, but the traverse speed isn't bad in comparison to other Tier 5 heavies. The turret traverse speed is actually quite good. The view range is good and the signal range is okay. One of the things that really sets the Churchill III apart from the other tanks is its armor, and on paper its armor is exceptional. 176 millimeters of frontal hull armor. Definitely much better than any of the other tanks. 76 to the side and 50 to the rear. Again, much better than the T14 in every way. Not quite so good maybe on the side and rear of the KB220, and the Excelsior is a strange beast which has no side armor but decent front and rear armor. But the armor, frontal armor, 176 millimeters of armor, makes this tank look very good on paper. The turret's armor, however, is a big negative, and as you can see here, 88 millimeters of a frontal turret armor, side armor, and 76 at the rear is not too bad, but in comparison to the other tier 5 premium tanks, it is terrible. 114 for the Excelsior, 101 for the T14 all round, and the KV220, which is not known for its turret armor, and its turret armor is considered its weak spot, actually has slightly more frontal turret armor. So the the Churchill III on paper is a tank that looks to have very good hull armor and very poor turret armor. However, that doesn't tell the whole story, so I'm going to be using Tank Viewer to destroy the myth that the Churchill III is a well-armored heavy tank. It really isn't, guys, and on paper, even though it looks amazing, and what actually surprised me a lot was how many players automatically switched to gold the moment they saw me in a Churchill III while I was gathering footage for this review. The number of times I got killed by players firing gold ammo that didn't need gold ammo, even when they were a tier higher than me, really surprised me. It was almost like I was driving my mouse for 30 games, and that tank attracts a lot of gold. But this tank is not well armored, even though on paper it looks it. For example, the 176 millimeters of frontal armor only refers to this area around the gun mantlet or the machine gun port, and that's it. That is the most heavily armored part of this tank, and to be quite honest, if someone is going to be shooting you here, there's a very good chance they're going to miss, hit you somewhere else on the tank, and pen that particular shot. So for anyone to be hitting this, they're either getting very unlucky or don't know what they're doing. The next best armor on the tank is 114 millimeters thick, and that refers to the lower glacis. Now, this is where the Churchills can be maybe a little bit troll, in that the lower glacis is traditionally a weak spot on a lot of tanks, and a player with a little bit of knowledge, or an inexperienced player with just a little bit of knowledge, might decide to go for the lower glacis because, as I say, it's traditionally a weak spot, but not in the case of the Churchill III. This is 114 millimeters thick, and it's angled, so someone shooting you here, maybe at distance and hitting here, is going to have problems penning you. Again, there are a lot of guns in the game, 122 millimeters, that are going to have absolutely no problems going through this armor, but it may cause problems for some. But that's pretty much it. Just this spot and this spot are the only major armored parts of the tank. Everything else is pennable by most of the tanks the Churchill III is going to be facing. I'm going to hide the spaced armor there. We'll take a look at the 88 millimeters, because we already said the turret is 88 millimeters to the front and to the sides. Also, the turret ring is exposed, and that is 88 millimeters thick. And again, this flat armor beside the machine gun port with the viewport in here, this is only 88 millimeters thick. And again, there are so many tanks in World of Tanks that can pen 88 millimeters without any problems whatsoever. All they have to do is aim at the turret, and the Churchill III's armor really doesn't live up to its heavy tank status. It gets even worse when we take a look at the 76 millimeters. That refers to the rear of the turret and this big area along the side. So if you can get to the side of a Churchill, you shouldn't have very many problems penning it directly through the sides. The only time you're going to have problems penning a Churchill through the side is when it decides to angle, but I'll go into that in a moment. 63 millimeters of armor refers to the weak spots, the machine gun port here, the viewport here, and a couple of parts or strips on the side of the tracks. But it gets even worse. It's got 50 millimeters of armor to the rear. It's got another 50 millimeters of armor to the side, a strip along the side of the hull. It's got 38 millimeters of armor on the upper front plate. Now, guys, if you do have to face a Churchill III, and you don't have a gun that can penetrate 88 millimeters of penetration, and that's not very many guns, shoot it here. Shoot it down on its upper front plate. It is only 38 millimeters thick. Now, if I'm in a KV2 and I want to one-hit kill a Churchill III, I don't aim at his turret. Even though technically I can pen his turret and I can one-hit kill him, if I roll low on the penetration values, there's a chance it's not going to penetrate and do full damage. However, shooting down at its lower or upper front places and 38 millimeters of armor, virtually every tank that can possibly face a Churchill III in this game should be able to penetrate a Churchill III through this area of the tank. It gets even worse. It's got 25 millimeters of armor on the roof of the turret. Now, it can be quite difficult to hit roof or turret roofs, but not in the case of the Churchill III. So not only does it have very poor turret armor of 88 millimeters, but if you're facing a Churchill III frontally, you can see that you can actually pen, even though it's angled. Even because it's only 25 millimeters of armor, you can overmatch that armor and you can pen a Churchill III by shooting it through its turret roof. This is why the Churchill III is not a hill warrior. It doesn't have the engine power, it's slow, it can struggle to get up to the top of hills, and when it does get up there, it doesn't have the best gun depression, and you're exposing your weakest armor. That is the turret armor. And I don't know how many times I've had tanks being able to shoot me when I'm trying to work this tank on hills, just because they can see just the top of my tank and they can put shots through here. Again, it's a myth that this tank has armor. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't have armor. The armor can be quite troll, and that's because of the huge amount of spaced armor on this tank. This tank has a lot of spaced armor. But when we were looking at the turret, we saw that it had 88 millimeters of turret armor, but that only refers to this area around the gun, or around the front of the turret. It doesn't refer to this depressed area around the gun. This actually is zero armor. This area of the Churchill III has no armor. However, it does have spaced armor. And that is an area around the gun itself that is 108 or 109 millimeters of spaced armor directly around the gun, but this entire area here is only 76 millimeters thick. So even though it is spaced armor, there is no armor behind it. And again, if you're shooting the turret of the Churchill III, this is probably where you want to aim, because shots in here will kill your commander, will kill your gunner, and can potentially kill loaders as well. Now, because it is spaced armor, sometimes those shots won't pen, but most of the times they will. Shooting this tank in the turret will kill a lot of crew members, and really, if you're shooting this tank anywhere but the turret, you're doing it wrong. So it has spaced armor on the turret, but it also has a lot of spaced armor on the sides. So not only does it have tracks which count as spaced armor and can eat shots, it's also got this strip of spaced armor here that extends down a little bit, but it's 38 millimeters of spaced armor. 25 millimeters of spaced armor towards the rear of the tracks. Again, these can eat shots, and even though the rear of the tank isn't that well armored at 50 millimeters, it still has a strip of spaced armor across the back of it, which can eat shots. So it doesn't stop there. We've got another 15, 16 millimeters of spaced armor, another strip just under the tracks here, and this area that protrudes. So there are a lot of layers when it comes to the tracks on a Churchill, and as a result, you can side scrape and you can actually absorb a lot of shots here. But having said that, this tank's going to be facing guns that fire HE. This tank's going to be facing a lot of guns with more than 88 millimeters of penetration. And really, if you do come across a Churchill that is side scraping to hide its weak spots so that it's only exposing its toughest armor, ignore the hull completely. Just shoot it in the turret, and a side scraping Churchill is only going to work well against inexperienced players. An experienced player is just going to shoot you in the turret. So I think the myth that this is a very well armored heavy tank is nothing more than that. It's just a myth. There are plenty of tanks and guns in this game that can penetrate a Churchill III. It does have a lot of hit points, but to put it into perspective, 122 millimeter, for example, is going to go through this tank like butter. HE can really do a lot of damage. RT can do a lot of damage to this tank. RT can land shots on the top of the tank, go through that 25 millimeters of armor on top, and one hit kill you. This tank really isn't as well armored as people think it is, and as I say, it's a big shock to me when people fire premium ammo at this tank. It's simply because they just don't know how bad the armor can actually be. So let's talk about this gun, this 6-pounder. This is a 57mm. It's the major difference between this and the earlier variations of the Churchills, and it has an amazing rate of fire. It's got a similar gun as you will find on the Matilda Black Prince or the Ram II. They're both 6-pounders. So you get the very good rate of fire. And if you've got equipment on this tank, if you've got a good crew, you can get your rate of fire down to one shot every 1.9 seconds. So the rate of fire is fantastic. And another thing that's very good about this gun is its penetration. It gets 110 millimeters of penetration with its standard AP. And what that means is you're going to, because this tank gets special matchmaking, it will only see tier 6s. Pretty much most of the tanks you're going to be facing against, you're going to be able to penetrate with 110 millimeters of penetration. You don't need to fire that much premium ammunition in this tank. And I love premium tanks that you don't have to fire a lot of premium ammo in, because it makes them even better money makers. So 110 millimeters of penetration is very good. But on those rare occasions where you come up against a very heavily armored tank who might be well angled, you've got 180 millimeters of penetration with the APCR. So the ammunition choice for this gun is very good, and there is very little you're going to be coming up against in a Churchill III that you're not going to be able to pen and damage. On the subject of damage, however, there are some negatives, and even though you've got an amazing rate of fire, and the alpha damage of 75 hit points per shot means you've got very good DPM. You've got to remember that it is very poor alpha damage, and that means that, for example, in a lot of tanks, what I like to do is maybe track them as they go around corners, track them while they're coming across a slope and can't use their gun depression. Because the Churchill III has such low alpha damage per shot, it may have a lot of shots and a fast rate of fire, but because the alpha damage is so low, you do have problems maybe tracking enemy tanks in compromising situations. But once they are tracked, you can keep them tracked, you can just keep pumping shots in due to this rate of fire, and it's a very nice gun. The major advantage the Churchill III gets with the 6-pounder over a lot of the other premium tanks using the 6-pounder, like the Ram II or the Matilda Black Prince, is the fact it gets a lot of ammunition. So you don't run out of ammunition very quickly. You can keep spamming shots, and ammo really isn't a problem. But another downside for the tank is its accuracy. Now, this is kind of a little bit misleading. Yes, the accuracy is not fantastic at .43, so it's not really a sniper. But on the other hand, it can snipe. Because you're putting out so many shots, and because the rate of fire is so high, you can afford to miss some shots due to your high ammo count and rate of fire. So you can actually snipe in this tank. I don't recommend it. The accuracy is not fantastic, but you can snipe. What the accuracy doesn't show, however, is how good this tank is at shooting on the move. Like a lot of slow tanks, the Churchill III is no different in that its accuracy while firing on the move is actually pretty good. Another downside to the gun is its aim time. So the aim time on paper doesn't look too bad, 2.3 second aiming time, but as I said, your rate of fire can get down to as low as 1.9. So it means that it's another one of these tanks with a 6-pounder that basically reloads faster than it can aim. Now that can cause problems at medium to long distance. You can't aim fully, but then you don't. You can aim fully, but then you don't make use of your rate of fire. So this, I would say, is a brawler. I would really say the Churchill III excels as a brawler. It likes being on the front line. It likes shooting at targets at close range, where the aim time doesn't matter so much. But the aim time can cause a problem, especially when trying to use this tank at longer distances. Let's see the Churchill III in action. Again, this is a 9.4 replay, so sometimes it's a little bit jerky. I do apologize for that, but I'm top tier. We're here on Prokhorovka. It's a tier 5 game. I'm top tier. And I'm going to do something really, really stupid in this game. Now, I do not recommend doing this in most games. I don't recommend doing it in higher tier games. But I'm going to be very, very aggressive to the point of stupidity in this game. But I'm doing it simply because I'm looking at the quality of the enemy team. I'm looking at the fact I'm top tier. And I know I can get away with it. But I would not do this 99% of the time. So ignore my gameplay. We're going to be focused on the gun. KV-1S derps a T-67, that's good. That's a very dangerous tank on the enemy team dead. You can see that it's taking me a long time to get up here. The KV-1S got up here long before I did. I'm doing 16 kilometers an hour. I'm reaching this rise. I've dropped down to 8, 9, 10 kilometers an hour. This tank is a slow tank. My tanks are attack and I'm only just arriving. So because I'm top tier, you can see me checking to my left. No danger there. I'm moving up. And I'm sitting on the ridge here because I know that my view range is good. I know I'm in a top tier game. And I know that a lot of the tanks on the enemy team will not have the view range. You can see me going to work on this Covenanter. And by aiming and delaying my shots, I'm able to kill him with a blind shot. So I'm looking for shots. I'm sitting up on this ridge. And Churchill III on the enemy team, he's got his turret angled. I'm going for his turret. And I'm able to get one shot in. So I've bounced one shot. And I'm being really, really aggressive. Again, I'm checking to my left, making sure that there were no tanks over there. And I'm just pushing forward. I would not recommend this, but forget about my gameplay. Focus on the gun. You can see I've got more than enough penetration to go through the turret on the Matilda. Bounce one. So I've taken a hit from a KV-1, and again my tracks absorb it. He's firing AP. Alright, so now I've lost a PZ-34 and I've lost the KV-1S that were beside me, but there's a Matilda on the hill. So you can see the aim time. I'm shooting before I'm fully aimed here, but I'm rushing shots out. And again, Matilda would be a problem for a lot of tanks, but not a Churchill. And unfortunately, someone kills him a split second before I get the kill shot. So Matilda, KV-1, KV-1S in the distance. So I've got an Su-76 and he's advancing. So I'm falling back. I don't have Sixth Sense. Remember, this is a brand new crew in the tank. But he's continuing to advance. Now watch how quickly I'm able to tear him apart. There you go. 3 shots and Su-76 is dead. I've taken my first hit from Arty for 0 damage. It hit my tracks. And again, I'm just being really, really aggressive. I'm top tier. My team are winning. I'm sitting up here on this ridge. And now we get to see the Churchill III as a sniper. And I've got an orange reticule on the side of the turret of the KV-1. And I'm bouncing. Now I need to hit this guy directly in the tracks, but oh, here's a KV-1S. He's angled, so I bounce. And he gets tracked as I fire. So trying to put shots into his rear. Finally go. And you can see that when you let the gun aim in fully, it can be quite accurate. But when you rush the shot to fire, as soon as you're reloaded, you tend to miss. So I've taken a second hit from Arty. I bounce on the move on the DW2, but fail to pen. And I don't need to worry about him anymore. So again, our team are winning comfortably. I'm up to 1220 damage, 2 kills. But I've been doing a lot of spotting and a lot of assistance damage as well. So I know there's a Matilda, I know there's a KV-1 in front of me, and I know that the other 2 heavies are down to my right on the 1-2 lines. So good shot from the T-25. Hit the gun mantlet in the KV-1, but fall back, because I know Arty's going to still be aiming at me. And there we go. So, tracks eat the shot again, but I still take 129 damage. I use my repair kit because I know Artie's just fired. I want to hunt down the KV-1. But he has been killed. I think I've just realized that. So I'm advancing. I know that the 3 remaining enemy tanks, I know Artie's directly in front of me. I know that the KV-1 and KV-1S are on the 1-2 lines. And I decide, you know what? I'm going to go over and deal with those guys because there's only a Sow 40 and Artie over there. I know that this is a win at this stage, but I want more damage. I want more XP. So I'm moving towards the heavies, but I'm keeping an eye on where Artie should be. Our VK crosses the railway lines, but for some reason is not spotting Artie, so for a moment I think Artie is relocated. Why haven't they spotted Artie? I know he's down there. Oh, no. Yeah, he is down there. Really, really nice camo rating. So take a shot before being fully aimed and get a nice bonus ammo rack on Artie. There's kill number 3. And again, this tank is a slow tank, trying to move over, trying to intercept the last remaining tanks. Not in time to take care of the KV-1S. I'm down to 15 kilometers an hour, 14, 13, 12 kilometers an hour, just trying to get up this rise. 10 kilometers an hour. So you're going to have all the problems in this tank that you have in all other slow tanks. Slow to get into and out of positions, slow to wrap up at the end of games. But this was all about the gun. It is accurate enough to snipe with, but don't count on all your shots hitting. Just be aware you do reload faster than you aim, so it can cause you to miss shots. But I haven't fired any premium shots in this game, haven't needed to. And that's why I love the Churchill III. It is a very good money maker. And again, shooting before being fully aimed, gun isn't accurate. Let the gun aim in, and that time we get the kill. So let's talk about crew, and the Churchill III is a very, very good crew trainer for a couple of reasons, but it's got a commander, it's got a gunner, a driver, a radio operator, and a loader, and it gets complicated after this point because it's a perfect crew trainer for some Russian tanks, but not others. You see, the Russians have a lot of heavy tanks, so when we take a look at Tier 5, the KV-1S and the KV-1, it's a perfect crew trainer. It's also a perfect crew trainer for the T-150. The crews fit in perfectly. But after that, it gets complicated. For example, the KV-2 has a second loader, so you need to find another loader from somewhere. And it gets more complicated as we move up the tiers, because the Russians have 2 lines of heavy tanks. If we take a look at the heavy line of tanks, you have the crew layout. You can train up most of your crew in the Churchill III, but you need a spare loader. And the same is said for the KV-4. You could train up most of a KV-4 crew, but you need a spare loader. And then things get even more complicated when we get to the ST-1, because we don't need the radio operator anymore, but we still need the second loader. And then we get to the IS-4 at Tier 10, and we lose the loader and we lose the radio operator. So you could train the IS-4 crew completely in the Churchill III, but you need a spare radio operator. This is all dependent on whether or not you sell your tanks as you move up the tiers. So it's quite complicated. You can train most of the heavy crews in the Churchill III, but you are going to have a couple of spare crew members, and you are going to need to find new loaders from somewhere. It gets even more complicated when we get to the IS line of tanks, because the IS will fit a crew into the Churchill III perfectly, but you're going to need a spare radio operator from somewhere. And that's the same through the IS-3, the IS-8, and then things get complicated again at Tier 10 with the IS-7, because once again, no radio operator is needed for the IS-7, but you do need a spare loader. But it's a decent crew trainer, and it gets even better because the Churchill III has a built-in crew XP modifier. It is the only premium tank in the game with a built-in crew XP modifier. That means that you earn more crew XP in this tank per game than you do in any other premium tank, and it means you can train up Russian heavy tank crews very, very quickly. Now, I've probably played through all my Russian heavy tanks with a crew that has been in the Churchill 3 at least once. Recently, on a recent stream, I rebought the T150. I put a brand new crew into it, played a couple of games in it, but I decided, while I'm doing this review, I'll play about 20 games in this tank before doing the review, and I might as well use it to train up the crew for the T150. So as you can see here, I've got my T150 crew in here. It fits perfectly, but these guys were at about 90, 92 or 93% when I started doing the review footage, and 20 games later, they have reached 100%, and they are at 85% on their first skill. You can train up heavy tank crews extremely quickly in this tank, and it's something I really, really do recommend doing. It is a very, very good crew trainer, even if it doesn't match all the heavy tank crews. It's a very, very good crew trainer simply because of that crew XP modifier. So let's talk about equipment, and thankfully there aren't too many equipment choices, so this should go quite quickly. Improved vents is the first one. I do recommend improved vents on the tank, but it is up to you as per usual. The reason I've gone for improved vents on the tank is the tank does have some weaknesses. One is its acceleration, another is its hull traverse speed, and another is its aim time. And improved vents help me with all of those things, as well as other additional benefits like faster turret traverse and slightly better view range. But it's mainly down to increasing or making the aim time better is the reason I went for vents, but it is completely up to you. A toolbox is something I do recommend on the tank if you're going to be training up new crews in it. This is a Churchill. You're going to be using your tracks to side scrape, and you're going to find yourself getting tracked a lot. As a result, with a new crew that doesn't have a repair skill, I do recommend a toolbox on the tank to get those tracks up and running as soon as possible, and to save you having to spend any credits on repair kits. However, once you do actually get a crew that are reasonably skilled in the repair skill, maybe you might choose to remove the toolbox and put something else on. Heavy spolliner, I think, is a complete waste of time on this tank, again because it's reasonably well armored from HE. But in addition, I think there are far, far better equipment choices you can go for. An enhanced gun laying drive is something I absolutely recommend for this tank, mainly down to the fact its reload is faster than its aim time. Anything you can do to get that aim time down is very, very good. Whether it's through crew skills or equipment, I do recommend it. So enhanced gun laying drive is a must for me. You may differ, it's up to you. Coated optics or binocs. Now, I will usually go for one or the other depending on what tank I'm going for. However, the Churchill 3 has very good view range for a tier 5 heavy anyway at 350 meters, but I usually go for one or the other. Now, due to my playstyle in the Churchill 3, I like being aggressive in it. Even when I'm bottom tier, I like getting up to the front lines. I like basically using this tank like a brawler, and that way I don't have to worry about the accuracy and aim time so much. If you're pumping those shots in at close range, accuracy and aim time don't matter so much. So I have gone for coated optics because I usually keep this tank on the move, and coated optics take me up to almost 400 meters of view range. Binocs will actually take you up to that magical 450 if you decide to play the tank more passively and as a sniper. I don't think it's a fantastic sniper, but it can snipe, so it's really up to your playstyle. But I usually go for one or the other, and in this case, because I keep the tank on the move, I like using coated optics, but you could choose to go for neither. You can go for one or the other or neither. There are a lot of good equipment choices or potential equipment choices for the tank. And then gun rammer is one that I am split over. You see, a gun rammer gives you minus 10% to loading time. Basically, it means it increases your DPM by 10%, and because the DPM on this tank is very, very good anyway, making it 10% would be even better. However, because of those problems with the accuracy and aim time, I chose not to put a gun rammer on, but I know lots of Churchill 3 drivers who do use a gun rammer just to increase that DPM. Again, the choice is completely up to you. Wet ammo rack, I don't think is a viable choice. I don't think it's a waste of time on this tank, because the reload time is so good. Even if you got ammo racked, even if you had a dead loader, your reload and rate of fire would probably drop from about 2 seconds to about 4 or maybe 5 seconds. And a shot every 4 or 5 seconds is still very good. I think there are far more viable and better pieces of equipment to put on the tank than a wet ammo rack. A camo net, it's a heavy tank. I think a camo net is a complete and utter waste of time. But again, it is up to your playstyle. Because I don't play this tank passively, I play it very aggressively. I don't use the binocs or camo net, but if you choose to play it passively, if you choose to play it more like a support tank, then maybe binocs and camo net are for you. I don't think it's viable, but then again, this is just my opinion, and you're free to draw your own conclusions. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. Now this is an ace tanker game. I'm here on South Coast. Once again, I am top tier. It's a tier 5 game, but it's a pretty nice matchup. But there are plenty of tanks on the enemy team that can cause me problems. But I want to get into an advanced position. Again, I want to be aggressive. I want to be the one on the front line doing the spots. So I am just going to head down to the rocks ahead of me, and we'll put our amazing DPM to use. So going for a shot on the move, don't have much to shoot at. But I know I've been spotted, and there we go. At an angle, bounce the M3 Lee, and there's a KV-1 moving in. Bounce a shot on the move again, but get into safety behind the rocks. This guy's moving up, he's completely ignoring me. You can see I'm having problems penning him, but I track him. Keeping him tracked, but I'm not actually doing damage. There's that low alpha damage. So, the rate of fire is allowing me to keep this guy tracked, and we get the kill. So there is the top tier heavy tank on the enemy team dead. They do have another couple of top tier heavies, but I don't need to worry about them too much. So I'm in a very strong position, and again, let my gun fully aim, and that would have hit, but unfortunately he dies. So I advance to get spots, and the enemy team are waiting for me. So fire before being fully aimed, and again miss a couple of shots. Okay, M3 Lee behind me, and curse of the M3 Lee is that cupola. Aim fully. Gun is not the most accurate gun, but the rate of fire allows me to get another shot in. So there's kill number 2. And Churchill III, Churchill at the back. I know that the Churchill 1's firing HE. Going for the turret on the Churchill III, and look at that, able to pen his turret, no problems. Whenever you face a Churchill III, just shoot the turret. Look how easily we're going through this turret. And I've just taken a big hit from a T-67. In fact, I've taken 2 hits from a T-67. That is a nasty tank. But I want kills, trying to track the Churchill. And again, the alpha damage is just not high enough to be able to track a tank. We sneak a shot into an Su-85. Churchill 1's firing HE, so I'm not too worried. The only thing that is worrying me is that T-67, and that little bugger's just put another shot in. So the armor, let's just pause it there, we'll take a look. You can see that the T-67 has absolutely no problems penning my turret. If you come up against a Churchill III, just shoot the flaming turret, guys. Don't resort to gold ammo. But he's caused me problems, so now I need to be careful. I've lost half my hit points. But because I've got 700 hit points, how many tanks can say they can take 3 hits from a T-67 and still have half hit points remaining? So here's the problem. Accuracy, I'm not shooting particularly well. But I do want to get a shot into this little guy, get some measure of revenge. We finally managed one. Churchill 1 is advanced and he's giving me a side. So again, a rush shot I miss. But once I aim and let the gun settle down and aim fully, we can still miss a shot, but we do have the rate of fire to pick up the kill. So there's kill number 3. Okay, there's a Chiha behind me, but I'm not too worried. Chiha's only a tier 3 tank. I'm kind of focused on this T-67. I want revenge. So this tank is very good at shooting on the move. And again, we're just going to pop the ridge. on the move, third person, and there we go. There's kill number 4. So I know that there's a T-34 and a Chiha behind me, so I turn around, and again, you can see the maneuverability of this tank is not fantastic. It is a slow tank, but thankfully I haven't wandered too far from spawn. So we're being capped, and it looks like my decision to go back was the correct one. Still 5 tanks left on the enemy team. But I've done 1100 damage, 4 kills, and I'm not... Oh, and a full health T-34. So you look at the angle, I'm trying to stay angled. He does pen me, but we're bullying him. We're now facing him at an angle. My tracks eat the shot, and someone else takes him out, unfortunately. So he got the first shot in as I was facing him directly, but after that we were able to angle and our tracks were able to eat some shots. You have to angle to get the most out of this tank. So there's a Chiha and there's a T-28 capping. So again, this tank is just slow, and I'm trying to get up here to get the kill. I'm doing 12 kilometers an hour up the rise. Thankfully we get up there in time, and shooting on the move, 2 shots in, we get the kill. This tank is very good at shooting on the move, but now we come down to the weak spot, or another weakness, which again is wrapping up at the end of games. I'm looking for my top gun. This is an ace tanker game, but I do want a top gun. I want to get kill number 6. There's only a Chiha left. He's on full health, but you can see how slow this tank is. Even going downhill, I'm doing 30 kilometers an hour, but I'm never ever going to get top gun here. Never going to get this Chiha in time. And there we go. So I think this is a pretty good example of what the Churchill III can do. The gun is not the most accurate, but its rate of fire makes up for it. When you do let the gun fully aim in, it can be quite accurate. It can snipe, it can hit tanks at distance, just don't rely on it. Its armor is very, very strong, providing you don't get shot in the turret. You can angle, your tracks will absorb shots, but as you could see, the turret armor is very, very weak. I was able to tear an enemy Churchill III apart simply by constantly shooting him in the turret, and the T-67 on the enemy team was able to cause me a lot of problems by shooting me in the turret. Really, it's the tank's weakest feature. And it really, really benefits when you come up against players who are inexperienced, who try to shoot you in the hull, who try to shoot you in the tracks. But it's got an amazing rate of fire. You saw that when I tracked the KV-1 and was able to keep him tracked in place and just tear him apart. It's a really, really solid tank. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Is the Churchill III worth 1,500 gold or 750 gold if you decide to pick it up in a half-price special? Well, this tank has a lot of positives and negatives. I'm going to try and cover as many of them as I can, but I'm probably going to forget some. It gets 700 hit points, which is more hit points than any other Tier 5 heavy tank. But not by much. But it will mean you can take 1 or maybe 2 extra hits, and it does add to the survivability of the tank. Its armor is not as good as advertised. It's definitely not got 176 millimeters of frontal armor. Experienced players know to shoot you in the turret, and inexperienced players might struggle against you. Your tracks can be angled, you can absorb a lot of hits with your tracks, but don't count on it. It really depends on the experience levels of the enemy team, and a lot of players don't even rely on experience. As soon as they see a Churchill III, they load up gold, even though they don't need it. So the armor can let you down, but it can also troll. So it can be a positive or a negative. The tank is very, very slow. It's only got a 28 kilometer an hour top speed, and that means it comes with all the problems slow tanks face. If your team are being too aggressive, the entire battle can pass you by before you can actually catch up. If you go down one flank and the enemy team has gone down the other flank, you're just too slow to turn around, adjust and change flanks. Really, you've got to cross your fingers, point your tank one direction and just hope the enemy team are there when you're in a Churchill, or else play it defensively. The Churchill III, even though it doesn't have a very accurate gun, is actually quite good at shooting on the move. On the subject of the gun has positives and negatives. It's got amazing DPM, a fantastic rate of fire, really nice penetration both on its standard AP and its premium ammo, but you don't need to fire a lot of premium ammo because the penetration on the standard AP is so good. But its alpha damage is not fantastic, even though it's got amazing DPM. Its accuracy is poor, and its aim time is slower than its reload time, so that can cause you to miss a lot of shots. Another positive though for the gun is you get a lot of ammunition, so you can afford to miss those shots. So it's a very good gun, I think, overall, and a lot depends on what equipment choices you decide to go for. It's a very good money maker because you don't have to fire a lot of premium ammo. It's also an exceptional crew trainer. It may not perfectly match some of the higher tier Russian heavy tanks, but it does match some, and a lot of others can be trained in it as long as you have a spare radio operator. So the crew layout may not be perfect, but it covers most of the higher tier Russian heavy tanks. But the reason it's an exceptional crew trainer is down to its crew XP modifier. It earns more crew XP than any other premium tank in the game, and because you don't have to fire a lot of premium ammunition in this tank and you can do a lot of damage, it means that you get high XP games as well. It means that you basically train up your crew members in this tank far faster than any other premium tank, and it is a fantastic crew trainer as a result. Now, a question I get asked a lot on stream or a lot on YouTube comments or in private messages is, "Hello, I'm new to World of Tanks. What tank line should I go down first?" My advice for a new player is to go down the Russian heavy lines. The reason I say that the Russian heavy lines are the best lines to go down when you first start playing World of Tanks is because you get the KV-1 and the KV-1S at tier 5. They are very solid tanks and very good tanks to learn how to side scrape, learn how to angle, and learn how to play the game in. They are very forgiving to new players. And what we're looking at right here is a Russian premium tank for heavy tank crews. And it's a very solid premium tank. And I would not hesitate, if any of you guys are out there, to recommend this tank. I think it's worth it. And I would go so far as to say the Churchill III should be the first premium tank anyone buys in World of Tanks, especially if they're starting to go up the Russian heavy lines as their first line of choice. This is a very solid tank. It is quite new player friendly. It is not that overpowered, but you can learn how to play the game in this tank. It will angle, it will help you earn your credits, it will help you train your Russian heavy crews. I think it's a very good choice for a first premium tank. I can't recommend the Churchill III enough. It's very troll, the armor is definitely not as good as you think it is, and you will die a lot in this tank, but you'll earn credits while doing it, and you'll be leveling up Russian heavy tank crews very fast while doing it. And there we go. Churchill III, is it worth it? Absolutely, yes. If you don't own a Churchill III, go out and buy it now. You deserve it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.